Distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first panel discussion at the Business BSF. The title is Interconnecting Southeast Europe. We are going to debate the subject that is dominating the debate in Europe at the moment, the infrastructure, including energy, of course. We have an interesting panel. Professor Leonid Grigoriev is Chief Advisor and Head of Analysis Center at the government of the Russian Federation. Mr. Yanis Kopach is the Director of the Energy Community Secretariat in Vienna. Elena Kuzmanovska, the State Secretary at the Ministry of Transport and Communication in Macedonia. Jean-Marc Peterschmidt, Managing Director responsible for Central and Southeastern Europe at the EBRD. Dr. Frank Jürgen Richter is the Chairman of Horazis. Horazis is the Global Visions Community, an independent international organization committed to enacting visions for the sustainable future. Mr. Janez Škrabec is one of the most known and respected Slovenian managers. He's the CEO of RICO, the largest civil engineering company in Slovenia. They are carrying out many demanding construction projects in the countries of the former Soviet Union and in the Balkans. Before we start the discussion, I would like to briefly make some comments concerning the subject. Obviously, the issue of energy is a strong priority in Europe. In the climate and energy policy framework, the European Commission proposes a strict target of reducing emissions and an increase of the share of the renewable energy. Energy transition in Germany, so-called Energiewende, is a major switch to renewable energy. It is widely seen as a revolutionary project. Shale gas might become a game changer worldwide, but we don't know. The Western Balkans, a region that largely depends on fossil energy sources, especially coal, has to address many challenges. The question how to encourage the regional cooperation and to attract necessary investment in the infrastructure will be, I suppose, one of the main points of today's discussion. Some big projects of common interest, including pipelines, are being already prepared. As we have heard before, the EIB and the EBRD are planning some big investment in the region. Surely we cannot avoid the impact of the Ukrainian crisis. There is a lot at stake. The EU is stepping up the gear to reduce energy dependency, especially with Russia. Key terms are energy union, diversification, energy efficiency, interconnection, solidarity, gas imports from North America, and so on. Gazprom's South Stream, one of the biggest planned investment in the region, there seems to hang a question mark over its future. Professor Grigoriev, which long-term impact will have the ongoing Ukrainian-Russian crisis on the Russian relations with the EU, especially in the energy sector?
I am not a politician and not a lawyer. As economist, our point of view is pretty simple. If it's not Ukrainian situation, you would never heard about gas problem, because Gazprom delivers gas and nothing else. And the problem, it's the only Ukrainian problem how to push this gas to Europe. Advocates for South Stream normally say why you would like to have delivery of gas from Russia to Europe, where a country which always in political crisis. Russia produces 10% of global energy. It's 4 times more than our GDP population. Half of this energy we consume ourselves, and half we deliver to Europe, mostly to Europe, very little so far to China and Japan. And probably we deliver to Europe on consumption level, probably 2 Germany consumptions, to annual consumption of Germany. It's mostly oil, nuclear materials, coal. Gas is not exactly, it's just political symbol. We deliver much more energy by all other sources. And as a normal economist, I would just isolate gas delivery from political troubles. On high political level and on probably it would mean South Stream instead of substantial transit on Ukraine. In the short run, I don't see any major trouble for Europe on the Russian side, except that by political sanctions, we're developing certain projects or financing will be delayed. In practice, it's too early. All this story is too short. It's just a few weeks old. Let's see. Probably it's premature to see any major trouble in energy sphere. Russia will be not doing anything wrong in terms of deliveries. I don't see any problem on that side.
But many countries, your neighbor countries, they have impressions that that Russia is using the energy as a political tool. How do you answer
Well, there is an old normative saying you cannot prove negative. You cannot prove negative. I published a chapter in Paris 3, 4, 5 years ago. And my point was very simple. High prices for gas, high commercial prices are commercial. Low prices are political. As soon as low political prices for certain countries disappeared, prices came up, it became a political problem for Russia. So far, all attempts to say that Russia using the political tool, it's mostly emotions, and people so much believe in it that we don't even take pain of proving it. It's obvious. Russians using. Now, why? Where? We have a Ukrainian crisis. Russia is using any weapon? Gas? Energy? Nothing happens. We just deliver.
Thank you. Mr. Kopach, we still remember the winter 2009 when a payment dispute between Russia and Ukraine left Bulgaria, Serbia, Macedonia without gas. This shows basically the vulnerability of several EU countries as they depend only on one gas supplier. Is Europe better prepared for the possible interruptions this year?
Europe is definitely much better prepared than it was in 2009. First, because very many EU countries built reverse flows during that time. For example, Austria built 3 of them, Poland built 4 of them. So almost every EU member state tried to build some reverse flows. Even Slovenia, for example, in Ajdovščina, built reverse flows which enable much better flexibility in the case of gas crisis. So I believe EU will not have a major problem this year, but some some countries, especially energy community member states like Macedonia, Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina through Serbia, are very vulnerable, and this is the reason why EU inside itself and we in energy community organized so-called stress tests, which were finalized right yesterday and will be analyzed and discussed in next days, latest on Ministerial Council of Energy Community on 23rd of September in Kyiv. I can't promise or guarantee that there will be no problems in case of this interruption of the gas supply, but I can prove something else, or I can guarantee something else. This year, the situation in Ukraine is completely different as it was in 2009. In 2009, there were several disputes between Russia and Ukraine, who is stealing gas, who is keeping it for himself, who is not sending it. This year, Ukrainian transmission system operator Naftogaz is every day promptly showing on internet, everybody can see exact amounts of gas, where it is coming in the country, where it is kept, how it goes towards the west. So Ukraine in this year is very, very transparent and very, very fair and reliable partner in gas transit, what was not the case in 2009. So I believe if there, okay, I cannot exclude some Wismaier, but I believe that if Russia will respect its obligations, commercial obligations, there will be no disruption because of Ukraine. At least now it shows like that. And the second thing, perhaps, if I can somehow reply on one statement of a professor from earlier, gas prices are really used as a weapon. Not political, sometimes also political, but as a commercial weapon as well. If we look, Gazprom is now for the second year publishing gas prices in different final customers' countries. And we can see that the highest price for Russian gas pays Macedonia and Ukraine. Macedonia, I think, is paying $490 per 1,000 cubic meters. The same gas in Great Britain, because also Great Britain is buying some gas from Gazprom, is approximately $260 per 1,000 cubic meters. In Slovenia, it is around 380, for example. In Germany, it is around 330, 340. So more we are going towards west, cheaper the Russian gas is. And this is because of competition. In Western Europe, there is plenty of competition for gas. And sometimes I make jokes that if the Russian gas would be sold further towards west, let's say in New York, it would be for free. But despite transportation costs are, of course, bigger and bigger, more you go towards west. So enabling better infrastructure, enabling more competition inside EU and in energy community member states is the only proper answer on potential gas crisis, and I think the only sustainable, long-lasting settlement of the gas market, not only for EU, but also for Russia and Gazprom.
Just please shortly.
I will not dispute. It's fine. Everything is fine. Two just short comments. Well, New York for free is exaggeration. But on the Ukrainian situation, there is one, unfortunately, there is one difficult point, because for supplying Europe in winter, it's necessary about 20 BCM in Ukrainian storages. And we confirm we need to buy about 5 BCM additional gas now before winter. We don't do it because it costs money. We don't pay us for our debt. I'm pretty happy about the situation to Europe. In 2009, I was in Kyiv on TV discussing all these problems. That was a mess. Now at least European suppliers are solid, but we don't know if we would be able to add to supply from Ukrainian storage, because we are not doing stockpiling now. I presume Gazprom is buying storage capacities all around Europe to deliver, but it would be around Ukraine, not through Ukraine. So we can't have a system of how we see the technical and economic situation is much more complicated. Thank you.
Mrs. Kuzmanowska, how do you see the situation regarding the gas supply? What does the secure supply of gas mean for your country? So,
Well, we are one of the countries that have to develop gas distribution network and increase the consumption in the following years. So our consumption levels are relatively small, and maybe this affects the level of prices that we are getting from the suppliers. Nevertheless, it's a situation where we cannot look only at one issue. We are a small country, and we are dependent on all decisions that are happening in the gas initiatives in the region. So everything we do, we must take into consideration every happening in our surroundings and further. While on one hand, we need to construct the infrastructure, and we are negotiating with EBRD for a loan to develop the entire national infrastructure. We are trying to increase the consumption by publishing calls for distribution network within the cities, because so far household consumption is non-existent in Macedonia. We have only 3 cities connected to the existing line, and I think annually between 100 and 130 million cubic meters are consumed. So while doing this, we have to see which regional initiative is moving fastest. So far, it was the South Stream, and it was very expected from us to speak how to connect to this regional gas pipeline. Nevertheless, all our strategic documents have foreseen every single possible initiative that can happen in our surroundings. So our distribution network is designed in such a way that if there is possibility and need, and depending on the best conditions that we will receive, we can connect either to Serbia or to 2 points in Bulgaria. One is existent, one is down to Petric, which will connect us to either existing or newly constructed gas lines. In Bulgaria, 2 connections to Greece, and potentially 1 to Albania if some of the regional initiatives happen. In parallel to this, we need to also think about increasing the consumption in the power generation plants of gas. And to be honest, it's a rather difficult process to handle all the issues at the same time, to trying to make the right choice. And our only goal is to secure as soon as possible gas consumption within the households, the industry, and the power generation plants, and to achieve it on most reasonable sources, having in mind that we might not be a major player in the region. And this is clearly an example how we depend on cooperation between our partners, and the trust here definitely plays a big issue.
Thank you. Mr. Škrabec, for you as a manager, I suppose the worsening of the EU-Russia relations, war in Ukraine, and the sanctions spiral is like a nightmare. Could you say that projects, including yours in Russia, in Ukraine, are endangered?
First of all, I would like to say I am very against the sanctions. I think that it's a very bad solution. Just one reason, if we believe that international trade, international exchange is win-win situation, then we have to admit that if you don't trade, then it's lose-lose situation, and both sides are losing, I'm not going to say who more. Second, could we do different, I think the most important question is where is it going? Where is it heading, Are we going to those sanctions avoid, let's say, the war, to get peace faster, or is it leading to the battlefield, And I'm not the only one. The other day I just read a very interesting article of Gabor Steingart. He is the German journalist in Handelsblatt, and his article was titled "The West on the Wrong Way," and I'm sure that we are on the wrong way. Could we act different? He pointed out very interesting similarity. When in Berlin Berliner faced the wall, you know, when the Eastern Germans started to build. What did, at that time, big leader Willy Brandt did? He didn't act like this, you know. He didn't start any sanction, although he was sometimes forced to do it, you know. And I see today we don't have in Europe so big leaders as Willy Brandt was at that time, you know, unfortunately. So the question, we entrepreneurs, we have to see in the problems opportunities, and not that the opportunities are the problems, you know. Fortunately, our strategy was always, we don't go just to the Russia, we have to cover the whole ex-USSR, since we have some advantages, you know. If you, for example, we are very active in Belarus, we are very active in Ukraine, Moldavia, etc., etc. And if you have this combination, I think that then you have much more opportunities. And I see right now in Belarus, where we are acting a lot, where we are very, very active, and we are in the investment industry, very high growth in demanding as far as the food industry is concerned, you know, meat, dairy, you know, beverages, you know, since they cannot get, the Russians are not getting the meat, the dairy products from Western Europe. And I think here, if something we are losing in Russia, we are gaining in Belarus. Another story, the other day from Ukraine, there were from Ukr-Prom-Energo, people were in Slovenia. We are doing in Belarus transformation station, for example, you know. We were not able to enter the Ukraine because in Zaporozhye was very strong factory for transformations, but in the hands of the Russians, you know. Now they came to us because they don't want to work anymore with this company, and offering us that we would replace them. So I think that we entrepreneurs, despite all those foolish acts that our politicians are doing, we have to behave pragmatic, and we have to find opportunities even in those very difficult times.
Thank you. Mr. Peterschmidt, in the EU we have consensus on reducing dependence on Russian gas. Do you see in this context any new window of opportunity for the Balkan countries to receive more financial aid or loans for the investment in the energy infrastructure, energy efficiency, renewable energy resources?
Actually, energy is a very large part of what the EBRD is financing in this region. It's about a quarter of our portfolio. It's about a quarter of the annual flows of monies that are coming to the Southeastern Europe region. And this recognizes that it is needed first because we have a broader sustainable energy and climate change mandate, and I think that's important, and that has consequences on what you need to invest in. It is needed because business want to have continuity of supply, but they also want to have competitively priced supply. But that is supply, but they can also act on demand and efficiency. And it's needed for the everyday well-being of the population. So I'd like to just break it down and step back a little bit in, you know, there's everything you can do on the demand side, and then there are things you can do on the supply side. And as having a sustainable energy mandate, you want to act on both sides. On the demand side, Central and Eastern Europe is about 3 times less efficient than the European Union countries as a whole. So it takes 3 times more energy to produce a unit of GDP, if you want, energy intensity, than you have it elsewhere in Eastern Europe. So before we start talking about energy security and energy diversification, let's consume less energy. And that is, it's a no-brainer, because It's a quick winner for those who invest in this, whether they are households, whether they are businesses, or whether they are public entities, public buildings, schools, hospitals, things like that. It pays back very quickly. It's a winner for the country because the country becomes less dependent on whatever energy sources they are using or importing. And it's a winner for the planet because you're rejecting less carbon. That is one focus of what the EBRD is trying to do more generally, but in this region in particular. Then on the supply side, we started hearing a lot and maybe a little bit focused on the gas situation. But on the supply side, what you hear today is countries want to have relative security of supply. That means diversifications. That means integration, because it's about building options. It's about getting flexibility. It's about not necessarily owning and building new physical production assets, but perhaps just trading. And that again makes eminent sense because today you look at Bulgaria, there is excess electricity production capacity. You talk to other countries in this region and the talk is about building new capacity. Well, maybe what we need to build here is new transmission lines and have more trading of electricity in this region. Diversification also is about renewables, and there you go back to the climate change agenda. It's about hydro, it's about wind, it's about solar, but you have to do it in the right framework because very easy for this to run out of support and become effectively uneconomic and unsustainable. But all of these are part of the EBRD's agenda in this region, and as I say, very high on our agenda.
Thank you. Mr. Richter, in the context of Ukrainian crisis, does Europe need a new paradigm in relations with Russia? Namely, going back to business as usual seems to be impossible.
Quite a philosophical question, Peter. And I should maybe start to say that I'm sitting here on the extreme right, maybe in your eyes on the extreme left. But I'm based in Switzerland, so we try to go for the middle way. And maybe that's what we need, ladies and gentlemen, right now. It's a very intense debate, and actually it's the first time here at the platform we're talking about Russia. We talked a lot about trust yesterday. We talked about reconnecting Europe. We talked about how to steer a new dialogue. But ladies and gentlemen, when I open the newspapers every day, I'm quite concerned because the current state of the world seems to be quite gloomy. There's a lot of finger pointing, and maybe you heard about Italian philosopher Machiavelli, who lived in the 16th century, quite nearby in northern Italy. He was basically saying that the means, or basically saying you use power and you point fingers, and the end justifies the means. And that's maybe what's happening right now. And Professor Grigoriev, you mentioned before that, and I try to interpret in a way the positive statement. I guess it's realpolitik, that in a way nothing is changing and everything will go on. Russia will not stop the gas supply. And I hope to share this view, but in practical terms, ladies and gentlemen, I think we are really facing a big crisis. We are commemorating the 100th anniversary of the outbreak of the First World War, and just 100 years ago, we faced actually quite a similar situation. Finger pointing, powers just saying, you know, we are not moving, we are putting red line, and suddenly something is happening, and it's a very, very dangerous situation. Maybe, and Janusz, I would like to comment on your view as an entrepreneur. We need to be pragmatic. Maybe entrepreneurs should lead the way and sit together with politicians, and in a way, leave away all ideology and what we read every day in the media and try to be pragmatic, really pragmatically trying to solve this conflict through dialogue. And maybe coming to the Ukrainian crisis, as it's a quite down-to-earth panel, we can say whatever we want. We want to try to face the situation. What maybe we should do is to get everybody on one table, starting with Mr. Putin, the American president, the European leaders, and of course Ukraine itself, and say what kind of compromise could we go for? Maybe trying to preserve the identity of the Ukraine, but still maybe giving some independence or some sort of, maybe in terms of economic policy, in terms of regional agenda, sometimes of some sort of independence to parts of the country, but preserving the national identity of the country. So trying to find a solution through dialogue. Coming to the region, and if you're talking about Southeast Europe, here actually we are facing a similar situation of finger pointing. Just 20 years ago, if you look onto the map, there have been much less countries. And what we see in Europe now, that many countries go for independence. Maybe Scotland will join the process I call Balkanization of Europe, where everybody goes to smaller parts. Maybe in Spain, maybe in Belgium, even maybe in Switzerland on the long term. We have 4 national languages, which I guess will not happen. But in this context, maybe the term of globalization and the concept of globalization comes to an end. Maybe, Francis Fukuyama's theory of the end of history 20 years ago, saying, the capitalism, the free world, globalization is on the winning side, and we can't go back in history. But maybe the whole concept of globalization is being challenged, and what we maybe might need here in the region is a new concept of collaboration, where all of you, the whole of Southeast Europe, sit together again. There was an initiative last week when the leaders of Southeast Europe met the leaders in Brussels, including in Berlin. It was in Berlin. It was Angela Merkel hosting the summit, which was quite an important initiative. And I think maybe this new regional spirit, that's what we need. And maybe just give up on Machiavelli and try to find a new concept of dialogue.
Frank Jürgen, thank you very much. Professor Grigoriev, from the Ukrainian point of view, is the project South Stream largely designed to exert pressure on Ukraine? In contrast, in Southeast Europe, it is perceived positively as the strategic investment with positive long-term effects. How do you see the prospects of the South Stream in new circumstances? How do you see this European debate?
Our Russian new pipelines to Europe were invented before the Great Recession. This audience 6 years ago, in early 2008, would ask me a completely different question. And I did it for years before the recession. Are you Russian investing enough to supply additional 100 or 200 BCM to the current contracts? So we put money in the new development, in the pipeline projects. Here a recession comes, and the Eurozone in the zero growth for years, and European consumption of gas down for 2 reasons. One is recession, another is switching from gas to coal, and substantial switching to coal. And carbon price is down, and if next 3 years, hopefully Europe would go up on some economic growth from 0 to say 1% or even 2%, plus carbon price up, and switching back from coal to gas, you will need gas. You in this case, the whole European Union. So Russians are taking, I follow the kind of wrong way. Gazprom, I'm not saying for Russians or for Russian state. Gazprom is taking the huge commercial risk to build a pipeline which was designed for additional supply originally. And the same basically for Nord Stream. Nord Stream was under the fire for a couple of years. After that, everything is fine. Nobody remembers how many stupidities were said about Nord Stream. It works. In 5-6 years, we probably will be here discussing how good is South Stream for Balkans, because Serbia, Hungary, and Bulgaria basically need it for development. Austria can live, live happily. But basically, and Slovenia potentially, if, say, second pipe could be delivered through, to Italy, second pipe gas. So this project is clear. Ukraine is just a transit country. We don't make too much money on this transit because transit fee is about, it's a fixed full cost, basically must be spent for repair and technical gas. It's not an income for the budget. 85 BCM, we make out few $1 billion must be spent for repair of the pipeline. So it's not basically a big deal. If country reached, after 25 years of transition, has a GDP per capita $3,000, 3-4 times less than Hungary, than Romania, Turkey, 4 times Poland, 5 or 6 times, and Slovenia. It's not a problem of pipeline. We must do something else to make GDP growing. It's not, we don't depend on these pipelines. It's a political influence. Yes, just we can block it. And let me, one small remark to Mr. Richter. That's exactly what I said. Nobody takes pain to prove that Russia is doing or may doing something wrong. But let me quote you. Russia will not stop the gas supply. What's the problem? It never was the problem. We just supply. If you mean 2009, that was stopped to Ukraine, not to Europe. And right now we stop to Ukraine, and we clear enough, thanks God, not to block the supply. At that time, we make the reverse by the same export pipelines. PR was completely terrible on Russian side, and displaying the switching off. But
you're right, Professor. Even during the Cold War, Russia never stopped the gas supply. But it would be very
Ukraine.
No, I think Russia never stopped the gas supply during the Cold War. But it would never be go so far just to analyze the future by looking back into the past and say, you know, what happened in the past wouldn't maybe be a security for the future. I would be very cautious on that one.
Fine. But what I mean, people so much used to have Russia as an offender in mind that even way of speech betrays this common attitude. Oh, that's good. Russia will not stop supply. Russia will never stop supply if it's not prevented from supplying. It's not a question to discuss. The issue is, back to Ukrainian case. Let's imagine the ultimate case. South Stream built, no gas or very little gas goes from Ukrainian pipes to Europe. Europe will never notice it. Just never notice it. It's not a problem for Europe at all. What does it mean, pressure on Ukraine? To do what? We will lose some assets. You just quoted how we are losing the assets. We will not be supplied by some stations from Zaporozhye Russian enterprise. Fine. So it adds to manufacturing decline on Ukraine. By the way, not quite clear how we are going to pay for your supply if you are not producing anything at home. The July numbers are minus 12% on industrial production. I think GDP in Ukraine this year is minus 10%. Official numbers, Ukrainian numbers, minus 6. EBRD, our sources give about minus 7, minus 8. Without counting Q4, it's going to be minus 10. If country is not producing, how it's paying, how it's developing. Let's imagine no crisis on Ukraine this year, just normal economy. To reach Poland in 2030, Poland, saying Poland is growing 3.5% as before, as recently years. Ukraine would need 8.5% growth for 17 years. It's not the case already because it's minus 10. We are talking about very difficult economic situation in Ukraine. And what basically Russian economists, not government, economists, were telling Ukrainians and Europeans that The only way for Ukraine to stay well-developed country is to sell to two markets, European and Russian, because we were buying everything sophisticated. Europe is not. To keep any level of sophisticated industrial of manufacturing in Ukraine, it's exporting to Russia. Otherwise, it's just impossible. So gas pipeline is completely artificial case to discuss on Ukraine at all. It's a special political case created by politicians. It has nothing to do with economy. It doesn't create Ukrainian economy. And Ukrainian economy will live without pipelines, transit pipelines. It's not a problem for the whole Europe, the whole world to discuss Ukrainian pipelines. Deliver and forget it. If it creates the trouble, okay, we go other ways, one or another way. So from professional side, it's not a problem. It's strictly political we are trying to avoid. And the more politics on Ukraine, the less Ukrainian development.
Okay, I think we have to admit that the energy is not only an economic good, it is also part of the security. Mr. Kopač, regarding the South Stream, what do you think, what is the main problem? EU legislation or maybe politics?
South Stream has always been a welcome project even in EU, but only if it would follow the EU legislation or so-called third energy package. What means that every pipeline that is built has to be offered on a so-called free season to every potential user, that the tariffs have to be established by independent energy regulator that exists in every EU member state, and that the producer or the trader of gas cannot be more than 50% owner of such a gas pipeline. This so-called third energy package was adopted just to prevent competition inside EU. And I have to say that I don't understand Russians or Gazprom, because in case of Slovenia, we negotiated an intergovernmental agreement that follows the third energy package. And this was the first case ever that Russia, as a state, admitted or recognized the third energy package. And then they copied this and they repeated it in the intergovernmental agreement with the Republic of Austria. In all other EU member states and energy community member states, Macedonia, Bulgaria, Hungary, Serbia, Greece, intergovernmental agreements are opposite, are not in line with so-called third energy package. And Russia, of course, insists on not respecting so-called third energy package. The reason I can only imagine. The region could be kind of an imperial. They want to have an exemption forever, because European Union allows exemption for investors. And for example, just to tell you one example with which I'm familiar, because we as Energy Community Secretariat approved an exemption. It is TAP, Trans-Adriatic Pipeline, that should go from Azerbaijan, through Georgia, Turkey, Greece, Albania to southern Italy for approximately 10 billion cubic meters, what is approximately the same amount or the same quantity or the same volume as it was initially planned for South Stream through Slovenia towards northern Italy. Investors asked for an exemption because they said, we need a monopoly to return our investment. And we said, okay, but they had to prove this need for an exemption, and they got an exemption for 15 years. And so for 15 years they can keep monopoly. But Gazprom would like to keep an exemption for 100 years, not for 15 only. And I'm completely sure that if Gazprom would ask officially for such an exemption, it would get it in a month or two. Even now, despite Ukrainian-Russian crisis, but Gazprom doesn't want to ask to respect European legislation because they want an exemption forever. Or I can only imagine that this is the reason. So South Stream, I believe, is very realistic project, not for Slovenia at all, but to come into Europe, but only respecting the EU legislation. Otherwise, I'm completely sure European Commission will be very strict against Bulgaria or any other entry point on the territory of European Union. And saying something about South Stream and Ukraine. Transit income from existing transit of Russian gas through Ukraine towards European Union is very important income for Ukraine. So it's an economic question as well. It's true that Ukrainians were very bad in keeping this gas pipeline in a good condition in the past. Now the things are, because they used this income from transit mostly for subsidies for their own industry and households. But now they adopted a new law just 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, which allows foreign investment into their gas pipeline, what has been a problem for the last 10 years, a big political problem in Ukraine. And they stated in this law that every company that is based in EU or in energy community member states can become 49% owner or co-owner of this gas pipelines. And for example, Naftna Industrija Serbia, which is in ownership of Gazprom or majority ownership of Gazprom, could, for example, become 49% owner, because Serbia is member of energy community, could become a co-owner of gas pipelines, transit gas pipelines through Ukraine. But of course, having gas pipelines on your territory is kind of a strategic position. And there are bigger games which are not related with gas supply, with commercial issues, but with, I believe, long-lasting political strategy. So South Stream has always been geostrategic project, never very, very economically proved, but doesn't matter. Even Nord Stream was not economically proved, but on a long period, I believe it will, the investment will return. And Russia is a big country and Gazprom is a big company, and they can wait on this long term. This is the fact. So South Stream is very possible, but respecting EU legal framework.
Mr. Peterschmidt, we know infrastructure and investments in general are key to growth and prosperity, but sometimes it is not so easy to figure out what to invest in. What should be a priority in the Balkans, especially because of the fact that governments do not have enough money even to co-finance the international projects. Furthermore, the region has not been able to realize on its own any big transboundary project.
Okay, so again, it's about integration and regional cooperation. And the countries of Southeast Europe are too small to simply envisage agenda on their own. Yet, by default, that is still too often what happens. So the first thing is you need real political willingness and leadership to go and tackle a set of priority projects together. That is what's happening when prime ministers go to Germany, as they did last week, or when they come to EBRD, as they did last February, and that is something that we have to keep going. Secondly, there needs to be an agreement on what truly are the priorities. It cannot be that we want to build every road, every motorway, every port, and every power station at the same time. Nobody can afford it. And a piece of motorway here and a piece of motorway there doesn't constitute any benefit for the region. There are venues for this. The Western Balkan Investment Framework, under the auspices of the EU in particular, is one place where countries, IFIs, sit together to decide what are the priorities and are these projects truly feasible. Which takes me to the third step. It's about preparing and sizing them correctly. There are too many dreams of white elephants all over the place. And there's nothing wrong with thinking big in the long term, but one needs to keep something that is modular, something that you can build up in stages. You then need to think about the finance properly. And many of these projects are sitting on government balance sheets. They are public projects, and I think there is necessarily a constraint because there's also a need to have prudent fiscal management. You cannot run your debt to GDP without due consideration for the soundness of your government balance sheet. So there's a need to think, how can you build infrastructure and energy away from the public sector? How can you commercialize the companies? They might still be public companies, but instead of doing it with a government sovereign guarantee, you do it as a commercial loan on the corporate balance sheet of a road, a motorway company, or an electricity company. Or you do PPPs, and I'm not a private sector zealot in this because PPPs are difficult, they're expensive, and they don't always work, but there are a few projects in this region where you could actually mobilize private sector. And then last thing, I think we don't pay enough attention to the governance aspects of doing infrastructure properly. You heard it from the two IFI presidents today. Proper procurement and effective value for the works and the quality offered is essential. I'm a little bit worried when I see companies coming, or countries sometimes, with bilaterally agreed grant projects that haven't been properly searched, that haven't been properly tendered. They may look good on the face of it, but there may also be, costs lurking in the back that have not been taken care of. So this is not, so I've said very little about physical assets, but more about the process that can bring together more effective and better thought out infrastructure development in Southeast Europe, where it is evidently a huge priority.
So thank you. Ms. Kuzmanowska, what your country actually expects from the IFIs, international financial institutions? Do they understand really your needs?
We basically expect them to fulfill our wishes for the white elephants, as the representative from UBRD said. No, generally we expect them to recognize the needs for the projects that we are proposing. And so far we managed always to find a common ground and common solution to identify the projects that need to be financed in priority. This is one of the major issues that governments face, especially governments of countries that are still not members of the European Union and don't have access to European funds for infrastructure. So we are relying on IFIs, and generally these are loans. And you know, because we are all smaller countries now in the region that we are looking at, we have limited budget spaces and we have huge needs for infrastructure projects, not just energy infrastructure, but transport infrastructure as well. So the main compromise is to adjust the needs, the priority of the needs, and the size of each project. And generally, in each project that we have discussed with the IFIs, the first thing that we are measuring is the return rate, economic rate of return, the financial rate of return, and they always double check the market analysis that we are proposing to them in our studies, and of course the cost forecasts, because usually these are the major risks associated with huge infrastructure projects. So we as governments usually always like to look at a little bit brighter pictures and more optimistic scenarios, but in accordance with the bank, we always manage to find the dynamics and size of projects that are probably more realistic.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Škrabec, I think you have a lot of experience in the region. There's a lot of criticism that, you know, governance in the region is not really good, that there's a lot of corruption. What is your experience? Is there really, are decision makers in the region really so corrupted?
First, I'd like to connect myself to the Frank Jürgen thesis. You know, you said that we need new paradigm in collaboration in this region, in the South Europe region. I would say we need just to confess that we used to live together for the last 70 years. We shouldn't forget, because we wanted to neglect our history, you know. This meeting, today Bled Strategic Forum is good that we are talking about the trust. But I hope that next year we are going to talk about the respect. Because I know experience from the Slovenia. Last year, for example, at our athletics organization, we didn't, for the last 20 years, we didn't want it to belong to the Balkan Association of Athletes. We wanted to be the part of Middle Europe, of the Western Europe. They didn't allow us to enter this part of the organization. That's why we were alone for the 20 years. Last year, with the agreement of our, but silent agreement of our politicians, we then entered the Balkans associations. Is it respect to the Balkans? You know, that's why we have to confess that we had much more in common that we are prepared to confess. You know, then we will be able to set the priorities, to build much more rational policy as far as the infrastructure is concerned. We would be able to find our where we have, how many things we have in common, and we build then much better rational policy as far as infrastructure is concerned, as our economy is concerned. But of course, we have to start again to respect each other.
Thank you. So, Mr. Richter, you wrote recently that we are often not aware of the importance of infrastructure. Do you maybe see the danger of wrong investments? I mean, a lot of money will be spent for huge projects, but at the end of the day, their effects may be rather moderate.
Well, let me first talk about elephants, if I may, for a second, especially the white elephants. And I think we need white elephants, Showmark, because we need to develop and shape the future. Long-term visions, long-term strategies. Maybe the whole gas agenda is just transitional for the next 20, 30 years, and all the issues on the pipelines and all the challenges, because we should focus and we will focus on sustainable energy, what Germany is doing right now. You mentioned before the changing of the energy agenda, what's happening right now in the US with fracking. And I would even say that US is maybe the most important economic engine of the future. It's maybe the emerging power. It's not China, it's not India, Russia, or the Middle East, it's the US. I think we are witnessing a new growth agenda in the US because US is repositioning itself on energy and a lot of new energy sources. Likewise in Europe, focusing on renewables, on solar and hydro, and so on. So talk about infrastructure. The question is really what is serving us on the long term. And we need to think about our highways, about our airports, and of course about the energy infrastructure. But we should really invest where we can reap the benefits on the long term. So we need white elephants. That's my conclusion here. And maybe we should also stop this divide between the East and the West. When we talk about the conflict between Russia and the West these days, it's always a category, Russia and the West. But is it really a difference? Aren't we just the same? I think we're all Europeans, and we share the same history. And, you know, if you compare Russian history with Western history, I think there are some common roots, a lot of common roots. And I think we should maybe, and it's your point, Janusz, we should maybe develop again the respect for each other, saying we are one big continent, and we should develop this respect and the institutions we need to foster this respect.
So the discussion has been quite interesting until now. We have, of course, time for some questions. Gentleman in the back.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is István Szabó, coming from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade of Budapest. I'd like to have a very short statement, and really very short, I don't want to interrupt your time, and one real question. I hope many answers I'm going to get from you. The short statement is about, in the last 25 years, and now I say East and West means within the European Union and also the West Balkan. That's not about Russia. In the last 25 years, the interconnectivity in Europe has been done East-West, West-East, which means we have the interconnection where the West could reach the markets in the East, new upcoming countries to the European Union. Second statement, if you have a look of the, for example, gas pipelines, oil pipelines, or highways, or train track, whatever, north-south, south-north, here in the eastern side, let's say eastern central side of Europe, let's say the V4 countries, Slovenia, Croatia, whatever, almost nothing has been done. A short sidestep, 2008, 2009 gas crisis, and the result, the impact is that we start to make interconnections. Now this was the statement, what I said, and now the question. About the generally diversification possibilities, let's say only gas pipelines, diversification. We know diversification of road, which means we choose another country that should be, for example, South Stream. We have diversification of molecules, that's TAP, what we see, something which is coming from Azerbaijan, let's say, and then, or Shah Deniz, and then it's coming towards to Europe, which means a different molecule. That's a diversification of molecule, let's say a source diversification. And the last thing should be the diversification of price. And it's a very important moment since we have been speaking about, and one of you have already mentioned, the further you go to the west, the cheaper the Russian gas is, which is quite an interesting fact. My question is, what do you think about, what is more important? Diversification of road, diversification of molecules, or diversification of price, which means, I think, interconnectivity. Because once we connect all the countries around, I'm sorry, then maybe the price may vary. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Professor Grigoriev and Mr. Kopac, they both
It's
want to answer and to add your...
Probably it's questions were not for me.
Yeah, but do you want to...
But
add
I want to...
something? So
Okay.
In this
Okay.
context, maybe
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
connect. So.
Well, we domestically we always criticize Gazprom for different things. But since I'm alone here, I probably can say a couple of words about in the defense of Gazprom. Otherwise, first, by the language of Espanol, South Stream is a white elephant. It's the only white elephant we're really talking about in life. It has very clever head, Slovenian, and stomach and probably Serbia, and cannot enter Europe because a lot of difficulty. It's easy to enter Europe as a small animal, but white elephant is a problem. Why we don't do like Slovenians? It's kind of an interesting question. Can you imagine, put yourself for a second in the head of Miller. Okay, I will be Miller for you. I'm Miller. I'm thinking, okay, Slovenians made a perfect contract. Very good. Now, what we suggesting me? To renegotiate overnight 5 intergovernmental agreements with 5 Balkan countries. Come on, it will take how many years? You can you do it overnight? And after to apply to European, sometimes hostile European Commission proving that this huge money should be paid off not in 15 years but in something else. And Gazprom believes in 2 things, as far as I understand them. Sometimes we don't understand them, sometimes we can do it. First, we have Nord Stream exempted. Why South Stream is worse than Nord Stream? It's the same country, the same market. And second, we believe if they applied for South Stream, why night before the door was closed? So we don't want to ask for exemption in this situation. We believe it was changing of legislation. And we believe it was made against them specifically. So that's they say. That's not me. That's Miller. I probably he never said it publicly, but Gazprom people said it many times. So why we would apply for the rules, which basically very hard to make in this case. In Slovenia it's easy, but to move all this gas from inside Russia via the whole Black Sea and proving where I'm white elephant, let me in.
Thank you. Mr. Kopac, you wanted to add something? So we're quite pressed by time, please.
Yeah.
Short and concise.
Okay, the question was about the diversification. First, I would say the most proper answer is diversification of routes. I think this is the first step. And European Union is trying now to answer or to make this first step with so-called projects of common interest, PCIs, inside so-called program of Connecting European Facility, which has quite a lot of money for energy projects, 5 billion euros, 5.1 from now till 2020. And I believe Slovenia will participate or will benefit from this as well, and Hungary as well. If we talk about energy community countries, which are represented here, we also, before European Union, adopted our projects of energy community interest. So we were more advanced than European Union, and you can imagine how hard work this was on the territory where less than 20 years ago still war was going on. We have perfect solution. So we have regional projects, but there is no European budget behind it. So no instrument which is called Connecting European Facility. And I think, and I would like to persuade or to convince now European Union as well, that they have, with this conference in Berlin and with all other steps, they have to do something more. For example, just to mention Macedonia, what a stupidity was made. a few months ago, or these weeks, I can say, European Union or European Commission asked from Macedonia to exclude energy as an issue from IPA funds, so from IPA national strategy. And this means that Macedonia cannot get any European money from IPA funds from now till 2020. What a stupidity. On one side, they are of course supporting projects of energy community interest and all blah blah, energy efficiency, European EBRD and EIB are active and so on. And on the other side, some officials there are making such stupidities. But okay, I'm not going now deeper into this. So only one message. What is necessary, I believe, is to enable or to transform Western Balkans investment framework, so a financial instrument which we already have, into co-financing instrument for infrastructure purposes. And second, what is needed is to establish a risk enhancement or risk mitigation facility for European neighborhood. Because in EU, you don't have these political risks. But okay, now in Bulgaria with this, let's say, because they're decreasing prices, electricity prices, and putting this burden on investors. But okay, Bulgaria is not a representative of EU. In EU countries, you don't have political risks. In energy community member states, you have plenty of political risks. And this is why we need, next to all instruments that already exist in EU, and where also EBRD is very active and thanks God also efficient in this, we need additional financial instrument which would be called, let's say, risk enhancement facility for energy community member states. And I hope that all this new attention which is now given by Angela Merkel and EU towards Southeastern Europe will result in some improvements in this financial infrastructure which is needed to bring these countries closer to EU. About details you can read on our webpage.
So we are really pressed by time. I hope the organizers will allow us to take a few more questions, and after that, just one round, and then the panelists could answer.
Hi, my name is Daniel Pantic. I'm from Belgrade. I'm running a public sector consulting company. So we are mainly executing diverse technical assistance projects funded by EU, EBRD, and others. But I wanted to comment a little bit on the policy side, and that I think, and that's visible at Bled Summit, Bled Strategic Forum, through years, that the level of trust among countries former Yugoslavia is increasing. You know, you can feel it, yeah. So, and that there is a certain sobering effect that today, 2014. We are all aware that, you know, at the national level, the countries are really too small, and that we have to work together. But what is really missing is greater respect for each other in terms of each other's needs. You know, one country will say, well, we need this highway, the other needs the other highway, this route and that route, etc. So like we have energy community, I think this should be expanded, yeah. I think we need the infrastructure community for the region, former Yugoslavia, basically. It's not Southeast Europe. Southeast Europe is a wider term. Maybe it could be Southeast Europe as well, you know, like it was under the Stability Pact, yeah.
Could you please ask a question, because we are...
Yeah, no, I just wanted to comment. So the question would be whether anyone envisages something like this, having such infrastructure community, for policy coordination purposes, instead of treating as a historic landmark meeting in Berlin with Ms. Merkel, and you know, can we have a structure for this?
Let me.
Sorry, please really be concise and short because.
I will be very short and very, I hope, concise. Congratulate for your comments and whatever you. But I feel sorry we didn't discuss more how to encourage other way of cooperation in the region. You were talking mainly about the infrastructure projects, which are mainly, public sector or public finance projects. And I believe in this area we have plenty of small countries, and we need, if we want to gain some power in the world, in this global economy, we have to cooperate in the investment area, in the, I don't know, not necessarily investing, but working companies together in the automotive, pharmaceutical, many other areas. Tourism, for example. It's difficult to sell Slovenia, but it's easy to sell the whole region. So this is, I believe, maybe even easier way. But lately what we faced in Slovenia, a very hostile, let's say, attitude towards some investors from the region in Slovenia. Why? We should cooperate and be more powerful in this very difficult global environment.
Thank you very much for.
Thank you very much. I'm Stephanie Trpkova, corporate communications expert from Croatia. And the quick comment is, on one hand, there is talk of integration, and on the other hand, there are caustic remarks that actually promote mistrust and insecurity. Well, my question was actually for Mr. Richter, and it was regarding, but I hope one of you would answer it, is regarding fracking as a new method that he mentioned in the United States. I was just wondering what the role shale gas exploration has to play in Europe.
Thank you. So please.
Perhaps I will try. Fracking in Europe is not a real future. Perhaps in some smaller areas in Ukraine, Poland, somewhere else, but not in major quantities. So this is unfortunately not our future. Me as a person from energy sector would wish to have it, but there are no geological capability or possibilities. Related to this initiative about infrastructure association, I completely agree. I mean, we have this SETSI, Southeastern European Transport Initiative, which was in the beginning created exactly as energy community, but unfortunately stuck in a process of ratification because Spain and some others were again. So energy community developed and is now becoming starting to cover also some environmental issues, some even some transportation issues. SETSI is somehow stuck in the process. I believe that European Union and its surrounding really needs a new pan-European organization. Of course, I'm promoting energy community as a potential seed for such an institution that would bring these neighborhood countries. I'm talking about neighborhood, not about Eastern neighborhood and Mediterranean neighborhood, but about, let's say, backyard of European Union in a more constant way. Because some countries like Georgia, for example, or Algeria, or I don't know, Egypt, will never become members of EU, but they have to be brought on board, because if EU will not bring them on board, somebody else will. Turkey, Russia, I don't know, somebody, a third power. And this is why European Union has to invent a new, I'm promoting it as a so-called fourth European community, which would bring these backyard countries on board and tie them closer with European Union. And I hope I will be successful with this promotion of this idea of so-called fourth European community, which is already discussed as a so-called energy union, but could be much wider, also covering transportation issues and many other. But let's see the future.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kupac. Anyone would like to add something?
Maybe just the answer. Maybe just the answer to Nena. You know, we were both in July at one other forum also in Sautat, which was also, let's say, ex-Yugoslavia forum somehow, and that's why I am much more optimistic maybe than you are after this forum, because I saw that this consciousness is mature already. You know, that we have to work more closer together. And I see already the light at the end of the tunnel. And also the last example, you know, when Agrokor bought Mercator in Slovenia 5 years ago, it wouldn't be possible. 5 years ago, we would be full of the prejudice, you know. I think that those prejudices now are much more on the lower level than it would be 5 years ago. That's why I'm optimistic.
Gentlemen in the second row would like to add something or ask.
My name is Gennady Chizhik. I represent the business from Ukraine. Of course, I have a lot of questions, but because it's 50% of this event is focused on the Ukraine. Of course, I'm a business person. I'm not professional politics. That's why I don't like to give this on my vision about the future relation of Ukraine and Russia, etc., etc. But I will be quite practical on the practical question concerning the business. I heard very attentively everybody and make a main message. Everybody knows what will be with Europe and Ukraine in 10 years, but nobody say what will be with our relation with Russia in 2 months. Second, I'm not agree from the business position. What the price of gas is the only commercial price. I give you example. 10 years ago in Ukraine, the price was $50 per cubic meter, 1,000 cubic meter. Now, practically 10 times more. Show me the price of goods in the world where during 10 years, 10 times more. Second, when we talk about the sanction, I agree, sanction is not a business process. Business should be out of this. But I would like to give the concerning the sanctions. You mentioned concerning the Mr. Chancellor Brandt, the situation between Europe and the Soviet Union. But remind me one agreement what the Soviet Union destroyed during their period of communication with Europe. I give you only one example. Was this agreement was destroyed or not? Very polite to this, the Budapest Agreement, where a very clear road, right. The Ukrainian eternity, it should be like, we have 4 countries who should protect the Ukrainian eternity.
Thank you.
And final question, crisis. I think when we talk about the crisis is a little bit personal point. But it's very difficult to say about the crisis. We've opened borders for heavy weapons from one country. Because I give you very interesting information. In Lugansk, in Donetsk, not working the airport. Everything is understandable. Thank you very much.
Just 2 or 3 sentences, Mr. Shkrabets. After that,
I said
that
just 2 sentences. Yes. I think I will tell you what will be the relationship in 2 months, even worse than today. But I can tell you what will be in 10 years will be again good, unfortunately. We will have to go through lots of disputes, conflicts, war, that we will be again friends. Unfortunately, we did in Yugoslavia the whole process, you know. That's the problem.
Dear panelists, thank you for the very interesting discussion. Dear audience, I'm sure we discussed some points that could be also debated further during the lunch. Thank you for your attention.